This is day 158 of the Arukh HaShulchan Yomi. If you would be willing, able, or even consider sponsoring an upcoming shir of the Arukh HaShulchan Yomi, please contact me directly. It'd be very much appreciated. We are doing today, day 158, Siman Kuf Yud Dalet Sif Vav to Siman Kuf Yud Dalet Sif Yud Aleph Be'ezer Hashem Yisborach. Let's get started. In Sif Vav, it says, you don't have to mention Morid Atol in the summer. It's not necessary. It's optional. And you don't have to mention Ruchos the entire year. Even though it's our custom to juxtapose Mashi Ruach and Morid Geshem, it is not essential. If you want to mention. In Nusach Sfard, they say during the summer. Ashkenaz in Germany, they do not say it. In Germany, Nusach Sfard, Nusach Ashkenaz. That would say Mashi Ruach is only because it's the prelude to rain. Like we saw, the Ruach Shachar Geshem, the wind and rain go together. If you don't say Mashi Ruach, it's not an impediment. Zeshem Mishael was saying Tal Motzah Bracha. Also, we mentioned Tal there. This is piggybacked on Motzah. The Vakshim Shia Tal Livracha. We asked that there should be Tal Shel Bracha, Tal which is a blessed one. The Shel Shel Bracha, there is Tal which is not blessed. Milum Amar Yirak the same Motzah. If you just say the same Motzah, Amar Tal, and say Tal, Ein Amakiv, it's not an impediment. Amar Mashi Ruach B'Yemos Chama below Marida Geshem. That we said Mashi Ruach in the summer, but omitted Marida Geshem. Oshimas Geshem Lama Rak Marida Geshem. In the winter, you just say Marida Geshem. And Machzira, so we don't make you go back. V'chein Batal. If you mean Sfard, Imamubi Mosak Shamim Ba'azkara. If they mention Marida Tal in the winter, Lama B'Shela, or you do not mention Tal in the Barech Aleinu, Lama Ba'azkara B'Yemos Chama. Or you didn't say it during the summertime, so for all these reasons, we don't go back. Ashkenaz do not mention Tal, neither in the summer nor the winter. And Rak B'Shela only in Birchas Hashanim. The Sfar Shaliskir Tal B'Yemos Chama, and the Sfar, if you didn't mention a Tal in the summer, I feel low the same Adaina bracha, even you didn't complete the bracha, and no chazer last year. You don't go back to mention it. There's no obligation. But in Baruchos B'Yemos HaKshamim, and that's the same thing is true about Ruchos during the winter. Chadadina Lahu, Islu, they all have the same halacha. What you kind of went under the bridge here, obviously, is that they would say Morid Atol in the winter instead of Morid Geshem, you don't have to go back and repeat Shemona Esrei. So perhaps it'll come up later on. Zayin Kosar Ben Ramah B'Sif Gimel Yeshom Misha Shliach Tzibur Posik Minas Gibur Tilas Musaf Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach. Those who say that the Shliach Tzibur stopped saying Mashi Ruach Geshem on the Tfilas Musaf the first day of Pesach, but Tzibur Maskim, but the Tzibur still does mention it in their preceding silent Shemona Esrei. They don't stop until Mincha. Sheshamu Kvar Mishlech Tzibur Shepasak B'Tfilas Musaf, by which time they ever heard the Shliach Tzibur formally bring to a halt this saying of Mashi Ruach Geshem. That's the minhag Akal Shano. Be'er Advarim. So Arukh HaShulchan explains the Ramah. The B'Shmini Atzeres Machriz the Shamash Mashi Ruach Geshem. On Shmini Atzeres the Shamash mentions Mashi Ruach Geshem. Avo B'Saka. But when it comes time to stop, you cannot make an announcement. We shouldn't be seen as repudiating rain, which is the bracha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But besides, how you said you shouldn't say Mashi Ruach, there is no impediment in mentioning Ruchos in the summer. And without an announcement, we have already explained, you cannot switch over. And and to announce that they're going to say Maria Tal, Abashkenaz, Ein Omri, Moshe's Bar. We don't say that in Ashkenaz. That's why you have to say Moshe Rucham Yageshem still in the silent Shmona Esrei. With Svaradi, and near the Chodesh, Shamash Yachriz, Maria Tal. They should make an announcement. Who? I don't know if that's the minhag. Maybe in the Varik there was no Hasidic Kehillah for the Arukh HaShulchan to take a look and see what they were doing. It indicates that they did announce Moed Atal. Shekosov, he says, also Askir at Shachriz Shatz Mashi Ruach Umrid Geshem in the winter, or Moed Atal in the summer at Kal Lashona. Ches, Imam Moed Geshem Yosa Chama. If they said Moed Geshem during the summer, Machzirna says, gotta go back. Since there are times during the summer when rain is bad for the world, such as harvest time, and even Chutzlarts, it is bad to rain on the harvest, the grain and straw, so therefore we make you go back. Make them go back. Also, interestingly, you shouldn't maybe different groups. Although I'm not sure how you see their groups if they're saying it silently, but Shazay ask it that one will mention, one won't mention. Where do you go back? Rosha bracha la togi bar. You go back to the beginning of the bracha, which is la togi bar, even though it's evidently the Mishnah brings down the Gra holds like the Rambam that. You go back to the beginning of Shema, say even remember in the middle of the bracha, but the Arukh HaShulchan does not hold that way. I'm not sure Mishnah does either. He says that you go back as long as you're within the bracha, you go back to Rosh HaBracha LaTogibor. Zog Shlosim Mechayim Mesim. That's if you didn't complete Mechayim Mesim. I will see him, but you finish Mechayim Mesim. Chos Rosh Hashanah got to go back to the meaning of davening. The Shlosh Brachos Rishonos Kechad Adamna. The three brachas, three first brachas are like one. It seems to me, it says Arukh HaShulchan, that if you ask to go back to the beginning, you have to say the introductory pasuk again. Since Rabbanan instituted to say it before Tefillah, again, his previous saying of Hashem Society has been interrupted by the brachas which have been nullified. That's he said over again. And even in countries which require rain during the summer, such as down under the equator, the men go back if he mentions rain, or Geshem Batal, or if he mentions rain and dew. The Dakushel Yashnaf Kamina, because specifically in She'ela, there's in Saint Talmudta, there's a difference, Lobas Korah, and not in Mashi Baruch Mida Geshem. Brings down Shai Tshuva says not to say Shai Tshuva because of Shalom Hashem owes him society. Talk with Tzarech Iyun. Evidently, Arukh HaShulchan does not want to paskin like that. Shai Tshuva. The Bir Halacha says when there is a lack of rain, and it's in the summer, but there's a drought. You see, that need for rain, and you at that point you say Mashu Kamei Geshem. He said, Sorry, we should go back to daven over again because at this point you really do need the rain. So he says it's better to go back at the daven as in the dava in this case, which is interesting because the chora, if you're going to daven the dava, first you have to finish Shemona Esrei. So I don't know how that works. The Mishnah brings down in also the Shai Tshuva Halacha that you don't have to go back to say the pasuk Hashem Society Tiftach. I don't know what you lose by saying it. Test. We most have shown Geshem. In the rainy season, we don't mention rain. Machzir no so. That's the way you go back. V'hadi milek shelo he's kir tal. That's if you not mention tal. He's kir tal. And machzir no so. But if you mention tal, marita tal, like the Sfard, then we don't make you go back. The halacha says if you even if you say marita tal, if you remember before the end of the bracha, you should go back to the beginning of the bracha and mention Geshem nevertheless. So Arukh HaShulchan now endorses the Sfard that they say Tal be Mosakama. Therefore, even in the rainy season, when you're not going to, if you don't mention rain, you come, at least you'll mention tal. And that'll save the day. And even in countries where they don't require rain in the rainy season, in the days in the winter in the northern hemisphere. So nevertheless, make it go back. There's no difference between countries in mentioning, only only in requesting in Borech Olenu. Even though in Borech Olenu said it's saying tal livrocha, that would not be sufficient if it only didn't mention motor. You're gonna have to go back. That's because they require both gam tal gam motor. Masha enkein baskar ba'alma, but that's evidently that's specifically not because in winter you require both things, like because in Borech Olenu you require both things. But in terms of mentioning it, that's Sheiknu et Tchias HaMesim, which they enacted by Tchias HaMesim. Because rain is life for the world. Also do is life for the world. The Gam Sheikh Tchias HaMesim also is it connects to Tchias HaMesim because there's a form of dew, whether it's real or mystical, that will be used Shlichu HaMesim to bring the Mesim back to life. Feel Yotze B'Tal so Yotze when Togi Bor with Tal. Also, in making a request, you got to request something which sometimes is not there. What is the request? And Tal may answer. There's always do. You can't really ask for that. That's why Tal is not a sufficient request. Not saying about his Korah as opposed to in the mentioning of Togi Bor. Shrak Shevach LaKosh Baruch, which only praise for Hashem. Yeshevach B'Tal, come over Geshem. There's just as much praise in dew as there is in rain. That's why tal suffices. Yud. He's kier, keshen, machzir, so that you didn't mention rain, they make it go back. That's only if you finish the entire bracha and begin the next bracha. Then you go back to the beginning of davening. If you remember before you finish the bracha, is going to say it in a place where you remember, which means you don't need to go back to the beginning of Togi Bor. Mishabur writes that if you remember after you said V'nemon atol achios meisim, you have to say Ma'ashi Baruch Me'agoshem and go back and say again V'nemon atol achios meisim, because you have to have Me'en chasima som chasima, the finishing phrase before the and bracha, which is akin to the end bracha. Be'ocha writes that the Kohen writes that if you remember we're in a place where it's not, it's the middle of a statement, not the end of a statement, like such as immediately after saying Kayem Emunaso, right? He fulfills the trust. Then you should finish Yishenei Afar. So Kayem Emunaso Yishenei Afar, and then say Mashur Chanegesh. So you don't have to go back, but yeah, you should do it at a place where there's a pause in the action. Back to the Arukh HaShulchan. Ba'ashazim chulim b'chayim mesim. Atar Rav Loshia. And even though it's supposed to be adjacent to Mechayim Mesim Atar Rav Loshia, but I'll tell you now you're going to say Achar Mati Ratzum Chadoimet. You're not going to say after other stuff. Nevertheless, sof Yibrichas Tchias HaMesim. The Brichas Tchias HaMesim, it is in the Bracha Tchias HaMesim. Sheikara B'chasima, because the primary bracha is the signature. But I feel seeing Brichas Mechayim Mesim. And even if you finish Mechayim Mesim, Imrak Logi Schil Atok Kadosh. As long as you start the next bracha, Yomar B'Sham Mashu V'Rmin HaGeshem Atok Kadosh. You could say it right there before you start the next bracha. Din Zeksav Arosh Mordechai Reish Tainus. It was written by the Rosh. Mordechai Avad Tur B'Kam B'Shem Avi Ezri. V'yesh Cholkim. Some people argue with Silei the Chosh Zim bracha that if you finish to Mechayim Mesim, go back to being in Shemona Say. Rabbeinu Beis Yosef Yechriya Der Rishona. But Beis Yosef Pasuk is like the first opinion that you can make it up between the brachas. V'lo Yibi Shulchan Aruch Der Cholekas Kan did not bring any arguing opinion in the Shulchan Aruch. The Moshe Berurah says there are poskim who argue, like we mentioned. Nevertheless, the Maaseh, remember after you said, although it doesn't say Moshe Berurah is willing to do that Mekel after Kel Kadosh, but he says if you said Baruch Atah Hashem, then you finish Lamdeni Chukecha, which is a pasuk, and it's as if you're still in the middle of bracha, and therefore you can go back and say Mashi Baruch Umigageshem. That works. It's a convenient way of negating and extending the bracha when you got yourself into trouble. Back to Arukh HaShulchan make up Saint Motor before we begin the next bracha of Tekabah Shofar. The beer halacha, it's not again more cautious. He says if you finish Birchas Hashanim, even begin Tekabah Shofar, don't say here it's Saint Motor because you can say in Shomer Tefillah and be able to say according to everybody. Back to Arukh HaShulchan. Nish'aru below bracha, and even though now in this case we mentioned Mashi Baruch Umigageshem after the Kodesh or the same time Monte Bracha after Mevarach Hashanim, Yesh Lamar Dekai Al Baruch Atah Hashem. It's not without bracha because you can understand the bracha is extended the following. Baruch Atah Hashem Achaya Mesim Mashi Baruch. So I can extend the Chasima. Kilu Chasam Gamazeh. This becomes part of the Chasima. Lo Shach Hashem Lamar Ein Chosim Mishtayim. Can't say this is a double signature and we don't sign off with two kinyanim. It's all one thing because that's the whole point. Machai Mesim and Gushamim have been linked together. The Chen Talmotah, saying with Chen Talmotah, V'lo Mashma. I'm sorry, I skipped. So the Chul Malchus. Please say anything that Rakim Techel Shom Machai Mesim and Mashi Baruch. The Chen Ein Din Zerak. Oh. Please say anything that Rakim Techel Shom Machai Mesim Mashi Baruch. But Arukh HaShulchan rejects this as the explanation because that's the case. There could not be any hefsek between the end of the bracha and saying immediately Mashi Baruch or saying immediately but saying Talmotah. Lo Mash Makay doesn't seem like there can't be any hefsek. So that was the Levush's explanation. So the Arukh HaShulchan's explanation is Vare Mash Makay. This certainly indicates that it is part of the bracha, even if you tarried a bit, as long as you didn't speak in between or say any words in between. Because you're not there's no interruption between the brachas. In these cases, sofa bracha have a miyat. So if you remember the end of the bracha, it is considered to be immediate because there is no hefsek. And you can stop between the words as much as you want. Not as much, but whatever. In the bracket it says here, "Ve'en l'shol lama lo chalakli b'siv ches ben siem lo siem." Why do we distinguish between in siv ches, where we talked about a person who said Mashi Baruch Umigageshem and who finished it? That he goes back to the beginning of the bracha, and we always mentioned waited here to see if you had to say it. It says the shani shehizkir, because there he didn't mention the Lord Haskir. I'm sorry, it's talking about where you mentioned Mashi Baruch Umigageshem and you shouldn't have. But you have to go back to your bracha for Lord Haskir and not mention it. But you can below Haskir, Mashi Tzorach Haskir, supposed to where you did not mention that you should have mentioned Yaskir B'Makam Achar HaBracha. Acher MaBracha, you mentioned some other place in the bracha. Yudav. It's a great principle. The first three brachas are considered like one. Any place you made a mistake in them, go back to the beginning. When he's an individual, when it's a community. It's only things which are impediments. Such as if you by mistake mentioned Geshem in the summer, or mistakenly left out in the winter. Or by says he made Shuvak Shalomar Melch HaKadosh. Or B'shari Chasimas HaBrachos, or when you finish off other brachos when you didn't say it properly. Called Shalomar Magen Avram. He didn't say Magen Avram. I heard recently somebody who sang the brachos of Torah, and he said Magen David, Magen Avraham. Nobody said anything to him. For either people didn't notice or people did not want to embarrass him. But the truth is that that's not the right bracha. And if it said Magen David instead of Magen Avraham, you'd have to go back in the first bracha Shmoneh Esrei. Oshlomer Mechayim Esi at the end of the Chaluk HaChaim. But if you made a mistake in the middle, you add a little bit or detract a little bit, it's not impediment. Because the Kamakomas Chalukos Menuskret Tefillah. We know there's several differences anyway in different versions of davening. Zolo Mikra Mushami Abesh Chachamim is not called change from the formula which was decreed by the Chachamim. So one of the brachas in an utterly short form. Mitzvahs like the brachas we make of our fruits or for mitzvahs. It's certainly called a change. You must go back. So Arukh HaShulchan says it's a suffix when you finish the brav kadosh. In the middle of the year, Hamelch Kadosh. You have a change for which you have to go back. Or is the melch even superior to Yotze? Rashi b'brachas. It says Rashi says brachas daf yibesh kasav hatam da melch kadosh b'aseres mechuba. This is our melch kadosh during aseres mechuba. Fisha b'yomim elu mara machuz lishbot ba'olam ayin sham. This is Hakadosh Baruch Hu shows his malchus simply during this time. Zelo shab chol shana. This is not relevant the rest of the year. Can you ever have a kedai v'shkolim? So wow, it's like you're lying. Wow. And therefore, says Arukh HaShulchan, the tzarich lachzor. Say Melech HaKodesh where you're not supposed to. You have to go back to the beginning of Shmona Esrei.